Welcome to the Therapist Book Club, where two therapists dive into their favorite books and the powerful mental health themes they uncover.
Whether you're here for literary inspiration, therapeutic tools, or just some lighthearted conversation, you've found the right place.
So get cozy and let's dive into the pages together. Hi, everybody. Today we're talking about The House on the Cerulean Sea, which I'm just going to go on record saying I loved. And I'm excited to talk about this book today. Do you want me to give a synopsis or do you have one?
Go ahead.
So this is, I would call it, so it's written by an LGBTQ plus community author. I don't know if he identifies queer or what, but he's in that community. And I've been reading more of those books lately. So I loved this suggestion. This is about I would call him a social worker. He call himself a case manager or case worker, something like that. It reminds me of CPS for children with magical abilities. So there's a little like fantasy sci-fi element to it. And it's a book that kind of explores the topic of how society handles things that are different on a whole variety of levels. Like you even see how his neighbor handles the fact that they understand that he's gay or prefers to date men. We see these children who have magical abilities be kind of hidden away from society and protected, that like essentially the society protected from these what we think are dangerous. Which I actually loved that. I loved that theme because often we react to like different things are dangerous. So let's go down the list of, and help me if I forget any of the characters. So you have Lucifer, who's the son of the devil. Then you have, I can't think of the gnome's name all of a sudden. You have a female gnome, which is abnormal. You have a water sprite. You have
Talia was the gnome.
Talia, there you go. Who's Sam? You know he's like a big strong guy.
There's Sal.
Sal. Isn't he a werewolf?
He was a shapeshifter.
That okay.
Like a Pomeranian little puppy when he got scared.
Which I think is hilarious. And then they were talking about like, and so Saul is your foster kid that gets moved house to house because he like scratched somebody one time. And I feel like I'm missing one more, right? Because they
the sprite.
Yeah, the water sprite.
Theodore was the one who hoarded all like the little trinkets and
oh yes, and he was a wyvern, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
One more. Chauncey.
Oh, Chauncey, how could I forget? And he's like a blob.
Yes.
A blob of goo. He reminds me of like the Ghostbusters ghost, Slimer, a little bit. Yes, and we learn all their characters and we see spoiler alert, we see a love story kind of develop in this story. Which I truly cannot even think of the name of the headmaster of this. Arthur, there we go. Because actually you and I had this talk. I don't even know if I don't know the main character's name because it is written first person. It's coming, well, maybe it's a first person narrative style. What is that called? Anyway, where he's kind of narrating through his point of view, but there are times that it's a narrator. And our main character is doesn't understand his place in the world and is just kind of going, he's kind of in the box. He is trying to just
be rigid,
told to do. And we kind of see him develop and grow. So what I loved about this book, I thought it was masterful in its tie-in of like literacy arc and like the plot, like all the characters had growth.
I thought the character development was so amazing because I loved all the characters. Like I laughed out loud in certain parts and I like these characters were so endearing to me and like I don't know. Yes, I just loved them. I loved the way that the author showed their characters.
Yeah. So I thought the main character was also such a good he had such great skills with the kids of like gaining their trust,
Mhm.
um, and not in a manipulative way, but I think they do point out it's like if you work in the foster care system or with child protective services, it's a great read because I actually think he did a really good job of fostering trust without manipulation, and that he fostered the trust so that he could truly protect the kids and help them get what they their needs truly were.
But I'm trying to, it's been a while since I read it, but I feel like when he first went into it, he was very black and white of like, I'm here to do
Doing
this
his job.
job and just to see like the black and the white, the yes or the no, is this good or not good? And then as
Mhm.
he met these kids and got to know them and the like the caretaker, things became less black and white in the way that he first went in. It did, I mean, he was able to see them as people rather than cases or numbers.
Mhm.
So he became more human and they became more human to him.
He reminds me of like how you feel when you're burnt out
Mm,
in the beginning, and because the way his dialogue around how he views coworkers and his supervisor and whatever reminds me a lot of like at some point. Well, okay. We all, as social workers, Tiana and I both are social work based. So we go into this field with altruistic, I want to help, I want to change the world. And
mhm.
and not in an egotistical way, but a like, I'm ready to fight
I
the
can do
fight.
it. Yeah.
And so I have a feeling he probably did go into that, like what brought him into it would be awesome to have known more of his backstory. But he came into the world to help protect these children, and I have a feeling he got stifled by maybe even teachers feel this way too. He got
Mhm.
stifled by the data and by the policy, and because that's what he kind of reminded me of in the beginning. And to me, I'm like, nobody makes that big of a jump that he makes
Yeah.
unless there's seeds kind of planted there. And
Mhm.
so I feel like he probably didn't go from being rigid black and white always.
Right.
Something probably happened prior to the start of the book.
I feel like I remember him talking about how he had worked on so many cases and had tried to always protect the kids and like I feel like there was some talk about that
Well,
about
there's it was honesty, right? So
yeah.
he was always going to be honest,
Yes.
and he was never going to so that's why he was chosen for this
Yeah.
job,
Mhm.
because they knew the upper management. I can't remember what they're called, but they were like this mystical.
Uh,
But he was called by the upper management because he had always been he was willing to say, yes, this place needs to be closed, or
right.
yes, this place is doing okay. Like he was always honest,
Yes.
because he's and they did talk about that. His In the end, the children were his focus
Right.
versus um I don't think he uses the word people pleasing, but he kind of like just like
Mhm.
not the agency per se. And that's why he was chosen.
Mhm.
And then he meets each of the kids, and they're very distrusting, which I can't
Yeah.
remember. Have you worked in the foster system or any?
I was a foster mom and I worked closely with caseworkers in that way.
So kids who have been moved from house to house are so distrusting of the adults in their lives, because you think about I worked as um what am I, a therapist. I also
Whatever.
have a mom, that's why my brain's half gone, but I worked as a therapist for a proctor agency, and in proctor care it's a higher level of care for kiddos in the foster system.
Mhm.
um and when parents and I get this, like I know that burnout is real for parents too, and I know that these kids can come with really big needs, but when parents get burnt out, kids are moved immediately and with very little notice, or when they're removed from their home, right? Like they're picked up at school. A lot of times that was the strategy, is they like that the caseworkers would use, is picking them up at school.
Parents. Yeah.
Mhm. And so like I've been involved in those situations where I'm trying to just I don't know, it was really that was really hard, because it's there was a lot of times that I was the most trusted adult that they had, but I was their therapist, right? And so I'm like, I'm not going home with them. And in therapy school, you know how they're like, don't hug kids. I always hugged those kids
Yes.
because I'm like, that's what they're missing in the foster home. And I know how sad that was for us to show up with their stuff. And it's always in trash bags. So if you ever want to do a really great service project, collect
Okay.
suitcases and yeah, for foster kids, but they'll show up with their stuff in trash bags and they're going off to a new place. So we're training them to be distrusting of the adults.
Of any outsider coming in.
Totally.
Yeah.
And these kids have that, right? They
Mhm.
love their placement so much
Mhm.
and they're very distrustful of this caseworker coming in. Um,
Mhm.
and
Well, and if I remember right, these were kids that had been in other placements before, and they were too dangerous or couldn't be managed for whatever reason, and this was like their last shot. Like this was the last place for them.
I think, and some of them did have behavioral issues in the other homes. Like sorry, Saul was one of those,
And Lucy.
and Lucy, I don't, and some of them were just so dangerous,
Yeah.
right? They were quote unquote dangerous.
Mhm.
Um, and so he did get like a case file, and actually he was every therapist and caseworker with that because he didn't read the case file.
Yep. He didn't want to go into it with any preconceived notions
Yes,
about who these people, who were these kids that other people.
I I laughed at that because I am a therapist that's probably not going to read your case file. I will
Mhm.
read psychiatric like evaluations, but like if you're transferring from another therapist, I want to meet you where you're at right now. And anyway, so he's every one of us. He wasn't being lazy. I'm
No.
glad you pointed that out. He was making a
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we see them go and I can't remember what triggered the I oh so after getting so he lives there, right? He lives with the kids for a while, and after a while he realizes that what these children are missing is like what are they going to do for the rest of their lives, like live isolated, like they need to be it reminds me of like our kiddos with autism, or special needs or like learning disability, like just now we're thinking, oh hey, instead of graduating to like there I went to a presentation that was called graduating to the couch, like that they
Mm.
were just home after they graduated, they didn't know what to do because we've never worked on the life skill to integrate into society. Um, and so the main character has this idea that he's going to integrate. Maybe we should go on a outing.
A field trip.
Yes, and the kids were beside themselves, so excited. Our little Chauncey, who wants to be a bellhop.
I listened to this book, and the way that the narrator like made different voices for all of the characters was perfect. Because
Yes,
Chauncey was like, oh
I know. Yes, Chauncey was super fun.
yeah.
So then they go there and they experience the discrimination that you would imagine they would. And they also make friends. And you know what's so interesting? Because I work in social work and I work in this field, it I had to like catch my bias a little bit because the mayor is so kind. I
Mhm.
was like, all right, where's the twist?
Oh, you were thinking it was like nefarious and
Yes,
like
I was like, okay, so she's like,
what's
and in
her
the end, she becomes, I loved her relationship with Talia. Like they bond over gardening and so okay, so that's kind of how it goes. And then there's a sequel to it. And to be fair, Tiana read the sequel. I chose not to. I personally loved the House on the Cerulean Sea so much. It wrapped everything up so well. I just didn't feel the need to
So
read the
let
sequel.
me say why I didn't love the sequel as much. So when I
Well,
was
will you
reading,
tell us really quick what the
yeah,
sequel covers?
the sequel, so okay, so the sequel go carries the story further and talks about how they further integrate into society and what that means for them and society. And but it takes it into I'm having a hard time like I don't want to say all the details of it, but
Yeah. Well, that's what it becomes threatened, right? Like their way of being becomes threatened.
yes.
And we see things more from Arthur's perspective. And I just Googled his name. His name is Linus, the main character.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the second book, right?
It gives a lot more about Arthur's past. Arthur is like the key, like the
The
caretaker.
caretaker. Hmm.
Yes. And all of the things that he struggled with to get to where he is. I agree with you. I didn't feel like I needed that part of the story to like I felt like the first one did enough of a job to like wrap it up for me. I did want to know more about what happened to the kids as they like had
Yeah.
more stability in their life with Linus and Arthur supporting them, but I don't feel like I don't know
I
that the
guess that is one point that would be interesting. There's a huge spoiler with Arthur that we're not going to share. Um, do you remember the spoiler for Arthur? Because in the first book they do talk about how he becomes the caretaker or why he's invested in being the
yeah.
caretaker.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I guess that would be kind of interesting to see. I loved the tie-in. I'm like, give me a happy ending for once, like just give me a
Mhm.
tie-in. And House on the Cerulean Sea does that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you one criticism, and I have theories about this. I wish they would have developed the romance more in this book.
I feel like they do that a little bit more in the sequel.
Hmm. I kind of wondered if having same sex partnership in a book, I wonder if that was toned down.
Hmm.
So because I'm just thinking, and I'm in the literature, I'm in the book world. I'm
Hmm.
like, you want your book to be commercial so everybody will read it. Would it have been detrimental to the book to experience more of the, like, it doesn't have to be spicy. Cerulean Sea is not spicy. It doesn't even have to be spicy.
Yeah.
Their love is so genuine and it
Yeah.
grows from this really beautiful place that they can see their hearts. And I would say it is, so we love spicy fairy smut these days, right? Like that's our favorite thing. Mine's the dragon smut. I'm in the fourth wing right now, um but I think it teaches false expectations of a relationship,
Mhm.
and the Linus and Arthur have a healthy,
Yeah.
like, yeah, just like a healthy, genuine connection that grows out of
Mhm.
admiration and respect for each other.
Mhm.
And then you get slammed with all of a sudden, and now they're in love.
Yeah, I
I,
did
it was a slow
get
burn
that.
that then like ignited too fast for me. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to see some more build up to that payoff.
Yeah. And I would say in the second book, it kind of takes that. It doesn't ever get spicy. Like it's still very like genuine and like the word I keep thinking of is innocent, like an innocent love. Like it's
Yeah.
like very it's a beautiful I think it's a beautiful love story and it takes it further and talks about how they commit to each other and like they commit to being like the caretakers of these kids and but I do feel like all of a sudden I was like, wait, they're in love?
Yeah, it does come on pretty quick, right? Like it's called, like, I would call it a slow burn, but then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it ignites and you're just like, whoa, how did we get there? It would have been really beautiful to see some of the stolen moments or
Yeah.
like yeah, anyway, it would have been really beautiful to see that. A moment I wanted to see that was when Linus goes into Arthur's room when Lucy is having the nightmare.
Mhm.
Following that, I wanted to see like Linus comfort or put his arms around
Mhm.
him, or and I guess maybe Linus was, I don't know that Linus has come into his own
Yeah.
to love a man in that way. I think he
He
maybe
does in the second book.
yeah, but I'm like, that could have been a really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
um that would have been, like, I think, a really good bridge. But I just wonder if we are a society who could read that and not be turned off by it. You know what I'm saying? Like, could we see two men experience that love together and see it? I don't know. I wish I was, I want to say no. unfortunately.
Yeah, and I wonder if it in the sequel he's more, the author is more black and white about that and like puts it on like it's at
Yeah,
the surface that these two men are partners in this raising of
right.
children. Like he's more like this is just how it is. Like he became more bold in telling that story and
Yeah, like he saw it was accepted,
yeah.
so it gave him the freedom to explore that more. Um, anyway, I thought, well, okay, so because this is the therapist book club, I'm like, I could talk, the book was just beautiful and
Yeah.
lovely. And
Okay, but here I want to say why I didn't love the
oh,
sequel
sorry, yes, go back to that.
because in the first book I felt like my whole perspective on this was like let's let's stop fearing people who are different just
Mhm.
because they're different. Like there's we don't need to be afraid of differences. And I actually was equating it to like people with disabilities or people with learning challenges, or because when I worked in the school system, like all of these kids that came and had like really extreme behaviors were like hated and shunned
Right.
and like sent away, or there were people talking about them behind their back. Like, and I saw all the lovable qualities in these kids that other people had a hard time seeing. And so I equated this book to that of like seeing the good in others and not just what they're presenting on the surface.
Hmm.
And then in this, and I had no idea that the author was like an LGBTQ ally or in the community or what. I didn't even know that that was like maybe part of his I don't want to say agenda, but that's the word that's coming to my mind. Like I didn't know that that
His
was,
worldview.
yeah, I didn't know that that was why he was writing this book, but in the sequel it became very clear that this was like what he wanted to say is like you shouldn't fear queer people. We're not to be feared just because we're different, and that was his agenda. And I liked the more global um use of this idea of to like anybody. It doesn't just have to be queer people, but like just because somebody is different, they shouldn't be feared. And I
Yeah.
felt like it got too narrow for me. Like I wanted it to be big and like anybody who's different should be respected and treated with kindness and compassion.
In the second book, it narrowed more to that
Second, it got
agenda. Yeah, because in the first book, I think he's so Linus maybe he was viewed as different because he was attracted to men versus women. Each of the children were viewed, so
Mhm.
it was a broader,
Yes.
yeah.
So I know why he did it. Like it makes sense to me. He was really taking a political stance. I read like the afterword that he wrote about the book saying like I am not going to be quiet. I'm not going to be silent. Like the people in my community are not to be shunned and to be hated. We are just looking for love, just like everybody else essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I liked the more global view that was presented in the first book to say like anybody with differences deserves to be seen and respected.
Yes. I think I would have read the book more if it had been a little bit more on their integration in like transitioning to adulthood.
Yeah.
But so I have a quote from here I'm gonna
Mhm.
share, and it's gonna tie into like, okay, so I think we've made our point of like what therapists can get from this book. I I think it's a fun way to show for therapists
Yeah.
what children in like the CPS system might be experiencing. I
Yeah.
actually think it could be good for them too.
Mhm.
Um, to be able to kind of in these different characters, like the theory of displacement, they can be
Mm.
seen through the eyes of something outside of them.
Yeah.
But Linus says sometimes he thought to himself, in a house in a cerulean sea, you're able to choose the life you wanted. And if you were the lucky sort, sometimes that life chose you back.
Mm.
And I was like, that is such strong implications for our work with people who um, maybe life hasn't worked out the way that they had hoped or wanted.
Mhm.
Um, but and I think that's how Linus was feeling in that book, right? But it's a message of hope of like starting here and now
Mhm.
you can choose the life that you want.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, what's the takeaway for you?
Mm, I think just going back to that, like everybody has something lovable in them. And when I worked in the schools, I often coached teachers on like treating all of their students with unconditional positive regard and like
Mhm.
everybody deserves that. Even if there are things that they are doing that you hate, they all deserve to be treated with that positivity and not necessarily positivity, but like true compassion for where they've been and what they've gone through and why they are the way they are. And I think as therapists, we have a unique ability to do that because we hear people's stories and what's behind their pain. And there's like maybe their negative behaviors, and we can see why they might be acting the way that they are. And we can have compassion, but we don't have to know people's stories to be able to do that.
My first day at what I called big kid school, when I transitioned from community college to, so all of you out there looking at community college, just know you can still be a therapist even if you can't do school. Anyway, transitioning to Arizona State University, like that felt like a big thing in my life. And the first lesson I was taught that day, which I love, this only happens in social work school. It was the $20 bill lesson. Have you heard that one?
I think so.
Okay, so our teacher held up a $20 bill and asked us all who wants it. Of course, we all are like meters running outside. We all paid like, no, not even 200. I think it was like 750 for the semester for parking. And so yeah, we're like, yeah. So then she crimples it all up and it's all wrinkly and opens it back up and asks who wants it. We still all totally want it. She then pretends to like blow her nose in it, wipes it in the trash can, and she's like, oh, now it's dirty. It's not, it's, it's wrinkled up, it's banged up, it's dirty. Who wants it? We all want it. She then rips it apart. And the guy, before she can even ask, because we're on to her, right? Like we get that this is like a teaching lesson. The guy behind me jumps basically out of his seat and he's like, I'll take it. Still worth $20. And she was like, exactly. That's exactly it. And she's like, if you can't do that for your clients, you cannot be a social worker. If you cannot see that this ripped up $20, it's not worth $10 and $10 now. It's still the value and the worth of this $20 never, ever, ever changed.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, I'm super rah social work, just because I'm like, there's something really beautiful to that positive regard. Being able to look at people as valuable also insinuates that I am valuable, and it's this loving kindness connection, like brotherly love kind of connection that we get to participate in. And when you read that book, the author does such a good job of letting us see that each person was so valuable and lovable, and you see their growth. I would say Chauncey's maybe the only one we don't see growth in, because he's just so perfect the way he is anyways.
Yes.
I loved the connection with like the Wyvern, Theodore, and I love like when Linus had to do his final interviews, and I loved there's a really beautiful moment with Saul where he's finally let in. Saul knows he wants to do this because he wants to advocate for Arthur. He is sick and tired of moving, and Saul is like the litmus test for whether Linus has made the growth or whether he's to be trusted. And it's just a beautiful moment to see that growth where Linus he essentially just drops the interview and just sees this kid for somebody who needs to be heard and seen. And yeah, and like there's just
the social justice of this book too, where he gets so Linus gets so brave, like speaking up and standing up for these things. Like once he loves them, he's brave, and that bravery extends to like him doing some pretty bold things, which is pretty cool.
I think this book is a 5 personally out of 5. And I think it's applicable to therapists to read this, as it's a book that will broaden your worldview in an authentic way, which sounds so crazy because we were talking about the literal son of the devil. But I do believe that I think it might broaden your worldview and understand people's perspectives in a very authentic way.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved the book too. I'd give it a 5 too.
Out of 5. I should clarify.
5
5 stars. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Well, I hope everyone will read it. And if you do, I hope you'll comment, because I'm on a kick on this one right now. My clients know I get on kicks for but I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks about this book, and
Yeah.
I am not commissioned to say this.
You're not getting paid.
I know.
All
Okay,
right.
we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on the Therapist Book Club. We hope today's conversation inspired you to explore new stories and perspectives.
Don't forget to follow us for more episodes, share your favorite books with us, and join the conversation on how books and mental health connect on our social media channels.
Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, your story matters.